welcome back to Rubyvale Road. I'm Alexandra and I'm so excited to share a tutorial on how to pattern draft and sew your very own very easy boxy sweater. So to start off with, of course, we're going to need to take some measurements so that we can draft our pattern. This is a very easy pattern to draft because they're pretty much just rectangles with a neckline cut out of them. So we just need a pattern for the sleeve and a pattern for the body of the jumper. And it will just be the same pattern piece for the front and the back of the jumper. So very straightforward. For taking the measurements, I definitely recommend, I'm just in a tight fitted top, just to make sure I get the most accurate measurements. And I would also recommend wearing a bra with straps because I'm going to be using my bra straps sort of as a guide to measuring my body. And of course what I need to make sure that I am covering with my jumper. So to start off with, we will start with the measurement for the neckline. So these will just be the raw measurements to start off with, and then we will do some little bit of magical maths, quick math, to then apply those measurements to make our pattern piece. So starting off at the top with the neckline, and I'm just going to measure between my bra straps, so in the inside. So just measuring these across, just close, like quite close up to the neck, and just measure between the inside edge and inside edge of the two bra straps. And then from there we would just want to measure from the inside of the bra strap to the outside edge of the shoulder. So that's my shoulder, so I'm going to be measuring down to about here. So you might be able to feel it sort of like the ball of your shoulder. So measuring from the inside of the bra strap, and just relax the arm and measure out, and then make sure it's nice and straight, measuring to there. So that for me is 7 centimeters. So you can see got from the inside of my bra strap to where I can feel the ball of my shoulder. Then we're also going to need to take a sleeve measurement. So we're going to measure from our wrist all the way up to the ball of our shoulder. Or I could say the opposite, which is from the ball of the shoulder down to the wrist. This again is personal preference. If you want the jumper to sit like in the middle of your palm, then measure down to the middle of your palm. I'm just going to go to my wrist, I think. I don't want it to be too long. Generally though, I do push the sleeves up anyway, so it doesn't really bother me because it is a bit more of a summer lightweight jumper for me because I'm just using a lightweight fabric. So measuring there from the ball of my shoulder down to my wrist. This is a little bit tricky. I'm going to hold this with my chin and then measure down like that. A little bit, probably not quite right, but anyway. And then to measure the length of the jumper, measure from the top of your shoulder straight over your bust and down to the length of where you want your jumper to end. So for me, I think I just go to like the waistband of my jeans. And one last measurement that you'll need for drafting your pattern, which I forgot to take, I'm very sorry, is your bicep measurement. So I'm just taking that here post-production. Sorry, so I'm in a different setting, but to measure your bicep, just wrap the tape measure not too tightly, just around the widest part of your upper arm, and that will find you your bicep. So all just very easy measurements. Of course, if you ever have any questions, just leave a comment down below and I'm happy to help. So here are the measurements and the maths that you'll need to apply to those measurements so that you can make the pattern. So just go ahead and pause the video here, and then with those measurements that you have, just quickly put them into the equations and then you can start on the pattern. So using the measurements that we've taken and then applying the maths to those measurements, we can draft ourselves our pattern. So I'm just using some heavy cardboard here. If you don't have cardboard, that's totally fine. Any sort of like newspaper, wrapping paper, whatever you've got that you can use as pattern paper definitely helps. So basically it's a rectangle with a neckline and a dropped shoulder. So that's pretty much all we've got to do. So it's a very easy pattern. So I've just cut my piece of cardboard into a smaller piece so it's a little bit easier to manage. And I've also already lightly drawn with pencil the pattern markings just so it's a bit easier for me to rule them, as I find I'm not very straight with ruling when I am trying to do it on camera. Really, to be honest though, I'm probably just not straight with ruling anytime. So taking the measurements, first of all, we are going to start. So start on the nice straight edge of your cardboard. That makes it a lot easier and can guarantee that it's already straight. So measuring in from the straight edge, we're going to measure in the measurement we took, which was between the bra straps divided by 2. So measuring for me, that's going to end up being 11 centimeters. So just measuring in there and then marking 11. Let me use my pen. So there's the ruler, marking from the straight edge in, and we're going to measure in 11 centimeters and just mark that point right there. So then measuring from the point that we just made for the neckline, we are going to measure the shoulder measurement that we took. So from the inside of the bra strap to the ball of the shoulder plus the 4 inches. We're then going to measure out, and we're going to make a rule. So for me that was a total of 17 centimeters, and then we're going to measure that and mark that point along the long straight edge of our cardboard. So with the shoulder, then from the neckline, you want to measure down at least 1 inch. You always want to have a little bit of a drop for the shoulder because you do have a slopey shoulder. It's not just straight across. It'll make you look really funny if you just keep it like that. So then measure down 1 inch, which is 2.5 centimeters. So measuring down 2.5 centimeters from the edge of the cardboard down, and then making a point there. So that all we have to do then is mark the new point, so the lower point, in a nice diagonal line, and you can just keep it straight, that's easy, up to the point of the width of the neckline. So I can just rule that together, and that will be our shoulder seam. Then for the neckline, I'm just going to do about 5 centimeters lower. Depends if you want quite a low neckline, of course you can make it lower and whatnot. I always prefer to have like a higher neckline on the pattern, and then I can always cut it down once I've cut it out of the fabric. It's a bit easier then. And so then just measuring from the corner here then, corner of my cardboard down, just 5 centimeters. Just gonna mark that point. To do a curve, if you don't have a French curve, I always just like to sketch it out. So just use like little dots and sketch it out. And generally you can get a pretty good curve just with freehand. If you have a t-shirt or a favourite jumper, you can also use that to trace as the neckline. So anyway, I'm just going to curve that together. And then I'm just going to use the same pattern piece for the front or the back. If you do want a higher back, then you can just sort of move it up 1 inch and then rule another line of how high you like that. And you can sort of vary between the two necklines with the same piece of pattern if you do prefer that. Then of course we just need to rule down the length. So lucky for me, the length of the cardboard was just enough. So my length was from the shoulder. You will measure from the top of the shoulder, so up here at that neckline edge, ruling all the way down. So just measure down. So mine I think was about 50 centimeters. So if I rule all the way down, measure that all the way down to the edge of, then you'll just need to rule a straight line from the outer shoulder all the way down to the length of your jumper that you measured, so what you measured from your shoulder down. And then that will be the pattern piece. So we'll just cut that out, and it's really easy. So that's going to be used as the front and the back. And just remember to make a little marking here so that you know to cut this on the fold. So there's my pattern piece all cut out then. So as you can see, it's very easy. It's practically just a rectangle with the sloped shoulder here and the neckline.
So next onto the sleeve pattern, again you can pause the video here and just work out your measurements and the maths that you'll need to make the sleeve template.
So for your sleeve pattern, it's really easy because it's just a big rectangle. So it will be your bicep measurement plus 5 centimeters or 2 inches. And your length will be the measurement that you took from the ball of your shoulder down to your desired finished length of your sleeve, subtracted by 10 centimeters or 4 inches. So I'm just going to cut that also out in this cardboard. So I'm just going to measure out the rectangle for me onto this cardboard and make the pattern for the sleeve. So also make sure that you must add seam allowance. So I've added 3 centimeters to the width of my sleeve and 4 centimeters to the length of my sleeve.
Now cutting into voice over Alex, so we're going to get started on the sewing. So for this project I'm using this beautiful loose knit 100% linen, which I found at the fabric store, and it's just got a beautiful lightweight and it has some stretch because obviously it is a knit. So if you can just find something with a lovely little bit of stretch that you'd feel really comfortable and soft for a jumper and you really like, then that would be perfect. Also, the most important thing to remember with sewing a knit fabric or a stretch fabric is to use a ballpoint needle. So ballpoint needles can just be found at any good sewing shop, and you can just change that out on your sewing machine from your regular needle to your ballpoint needle.
So once you've just got your pattern piece positioned onto your fabric with the middle edge lining up with the fold of your fabric, you can then go around and cut all the other edges. Of course, do not cut on the fold. This cardboard is quite heavy and it's just been really difficult with trying to pin into place, so I've decided I'm just going to use these heavy objects to hold it down while I cut. I'm probably not going to film this because it's probably going to be a bit of a mess, but we're going to cut 2 of these on the fold, and then we're going to cut our sleeves, and we're just going to cut the sleeves 2 separate pieces, not on the fold. So there we've got our 2 pieces cut out, so the front and the back is just the same pattern piece, so that was really easy. And then we've got our 2 sleeves, which are just the 2 rectangles according to the measurements that we made the pattern from. As you can see, very, very simple. Now to start sewing. So taking the front and back bodice piece, place them together with right sides facing together, and then we're going to pin and sew along both shoulder seams using a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. So there you can see our shoulder seams sewn together, joining our front and back bodice pieces together. So now that those are done, we can move on to sewing our sleeves. So to sew the sleeves, we're just going to fold our sleeve, well, the rectangle, really it's all just a rectangle. We're just going to fold it in half lengthways and pin and sew along the long edge, obviously leaving the 2 short ends open. And of course what we've done to one sleeve, we'll do the same to the other, so fold in half and pin and sew along the long edge on the other sleeve. And then just to finish the raw edges inside, I've just used an overlocker on all the seams that I've just stitched. If you don't have an overlocker, that's fine, you can do a zigzag stitch, but also stretch fabrics don't necessarily always need a finished seam on the inside. Next we're going to sew the side seams of the body of the jumper. So taking the sleeve, lying it flat, and also lying the body of the jumper nice and flat, we're just going to line up the sleeve with the top edge of the jumper and then use a pin to mark where the end of the sleeve hits the bodice. So that way we can measure how much of an opening we'll need to leave on the side seams to then insert the sleeves. So from the pin mark, we'll then pin the rest of the side seam down to the hem, and that will be where we stitch it. So then of course to do this on the other side, you can measure again with the sleeve or use your tape measure to measure what you've measured from the top of the jumper to the pin mark, and then measure that over onto the other side, so that you've of course then got a nice symmetrical jumper. And then of course we're going to again pin down from the pin mark down to the hem of the jumper to where we're going to sew those side seams together. So then sew those side seams together, only where pinned, of course leaving that opening for the sleeves, and do that on both sides, stitching with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. So now that the side seams are stitched together, we are going to take our sleeves, turning them out the right way, and then inserting the sleeve through the jumper, through that opening that we left at the top of the side seam, and we're going to align the seam of the sleeve with the side seam of the jumper so that those two line up nicely. So just pin those in place to make sure that they do. And then we're just going to pin and sew all the way around the armhole, joining that sleeve to the body of the jumper. Obviously we're going to do that on both sides and just sew it with a 1.5 centimeter seam allowance. Once it's stitched, and then you'll see that it's sort of got a little bit of a bit bulky under the arm, so just sort of fold it and cut on a little angle to cut a little notch or triangle so that your sleeve will allow your arm to be able to be lifted up without pulling too much. So that's pretty much the body of the jumper all done. All that's left now is to hem all of the raw edges. So starting with the sleeves, we're going to fold under 1.5 centimeters and fold under another 1.5 centimeters, pin that in place, and then stitch on your sewing machine. And of course, we're going to do then the same with the neckline, folding under the 1.5 centimeters and 1.5 centimeters, pinning in place and stitching on the sewing machine. And lastly, guess what? Yes, we're going to do exactly the same thing again with the hem of the jumper. Folding under 1.5 centimeters, folding under another 1.5 centimeters, pinning in place and stitching. And there we have it! The jumper is all finished. Honestly, this was like one of the quickest things to sew. It was amazing. And make sure when you're sewing with a stitch fabric, big top tip, do not stretch the fabric as it feeds through. Really just sort of like let the fabric go through the presser foot as it sews. If you stretch it, you'll get a really bubbly neckline and really don't want that. So just make sure with sewing a stretch fabric that you don't pull on your fabric too much as you sew it. Now the only thing is, as I've stitched this, I haven't actually been ironing, so do remember of course to iron all your seams as you sew. I just haven't been a bit lazy and in a little bit of a rush, so I haven't ironed anything, but I'll go through it over with the iron now that it's all done and press everything so it looks really good. But that is how to sew a boxy jumper.
I'm really actually so happy with this and how fast it turned out. I know it's going to be something that I'm going to wear a lot because it's a beautiful fabric, it's 100% linen, and of course a classic black and white stripe, so it can't go wrong, and it's a really easy casual fit. So I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Please leave the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the Rubyvale Road YouTube channel for more sewing videos, and if you'd like to check me out, I'm also at Rubyvale Road on Facebook and Instagram. I'd love to see you and love for you to say hi, or better yet, tag me in your own creation using my tutorial. So thank you so much and best wishes on all your sewing adventures. Bye bye!